Mr. Jones called Matt to his room one day when his mom and the girls were out and spoke to him about the inevitability of his death and the role that would be expected of Matt as the man of the house. Of course, Matt tried to change the subject, but his father would not allow it. It seemed like it was just yesterday that Matt sat on the edge of his father's bed and felt his whole world start to unravel around him. Looking at his father's shrunken face, hearing the weakness in his voice, and trying not to notice the pill bottles and oxygen tanks lining the room made Matt want to break down and cry like a little baby. But he had to be strong for his father. Everyone was trying to be strong for him. His mother had talked to them and let them know how they had to be brave and strong. So he always saved his tears until he was safe in his room, and he was sure the others did too. He promised his father he would be a good boy for his mother and protect his sisters, and he intended to do everything in his power to keep his word. The day his father died was a day Matt would never forget. As soon as the kids had come home from school, they knew something was wrong because Aunt Myra's kids were sitting on the steps and they looked like they had been crying. The girls and Matt stood looking at each other for a minute and then dropped their books and ran into the house, straight to their mother and father's bedroom. They stopped short when they saw Aunt Myra standing in the doorway and heard their mother inside the room crying quietly. Vet and Nick broke out in tears, holding on to each other, but Matt held his tears and walked over to his mother, sitting on the bed that had held their father's feeble body for 5 long months. She made sure the body had been taken away before the children came home from school and put his arms around her, telling her everything was going to be all right. He did not feel all the courage he was trying to spread, but he had promised his father he was going to be strong for the women after he was gone, and he was not about to let his father down. The pain over losing their father drew the kids closer together, not just because they loved each other, but because they saw what it was doing to their mother, and they were determined to make things easy for her as possible. So the usual bickering they did was cut out until they were out of her presence, and then it was every man for him or herself. Matt agreed he usually went easy on the girls, but lately they were getting out of hand, and it was time he gave them a little taste of their own medicine, a little something to let them know he was no pushover. Yeah, it was definitely time for a little payback, and just the thought of getting even with the wicked witches of the East and West brought a smile to his already handsome face. He didn't even mind not being able to wear his new sneakers and having to run all the way from the bus stop. 7 long blocks. Now, that didn't seem so bad. True, he had to pray several times to keep his temper under control, but suddenly he had something to smile about. He didn't know what it was going to be just yet, and he didn't even know when it was going to be. All he knew is that it was going to be good. He had first thought of telling their mother about all their devious little tricks. But why bother her when all he had to do was use his imagination to stop them dead in their tracks? They always told him that since it was two of them and only one of him, they were always going to outdo him. Well, they were just going to have to see about that, wouldn't they? After bumping into Vet in the stairway and pretending he was still angry about her morning prank, he laughed all the way to class. Yes, this was going to be fun. Matt walked into his second period class and saw a new guy sitting on the seat next to his and capturing the attention of all the girls in the class. What is this? Thought Matt. He was usually the attention getter in his classes, And the fact that he had been working out over the summer meant he was ready for all the new attention he should be getting instead of this new guy. As Matt walked into the room and the girls noticed him and saw the fruit of his summer labor, he soon took all of the attention from the new guy. He smiled smugly as they surrounded him, squeezing his muscles, sat on his lap, and pumped his ego to giant sized heights. He was used to girls competing with each other for his attention. And even though he had to ask God to forgive him for some of the lustful thoughts that entered his head, he was sure it was okay since he was just having a little fun and there was no intention on pursuing any of these temptations. A little twang of guilt began nagging at his mind when suddenly Minister Curtis's words replayed themselves in his mind about lustful thinking. The Bible tells us that we ought to keep our minds and our bodies subject. And if we sin in our minds, it is the same as if we had already committed the act, he said one night in one of the men's night services they held monthly at the church. Many of the young men felt it was ridiculous to feel guilty for just a thought when nothing was actually happening. Some even got angry and felt it was unrealistic to think young men could or should walk around without entertaining thoughts of them and girls, especially when they were surrounded by so many girls. Come on, Minister Curtis, said Jason incredulously. You all are trying to ask for the impossible. We're human. How we going to not even think about being with a girl? That's just plain crazy. Yo, said Omar, I don't mind coming to church and everything, and I'll try to respect the females and God and myself and all that. But when you start saying things like we can't even think about doing what is natural, not to say I'm not doing anything, he says, looking around menacingly at everyone, then you're asking for a bit much. You're not dealing in reality. Wait just a minute, interrupted Minister Curtis, standing and gaining control of the session. I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear or what sounds good. I have to give you the word. And the word says in Titus 2 and 12, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lusts, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this world. So you see, Matt was brought back to the present by a familiar face that stepped into the classroom just then. Oh man, how am I going to concentrate when two of the world's most gorgeous men are in my class? Matt, oh, baby, you've been working out, yelled Jill as she made her way over to Matt and roughly pushed all the other girls out of the way and straddled his lap, hugging him and kissing all over his face. Come on, Jill, chill, he said, trying to get up and looking embarrassed. Aw, don't be like that, baby. I missed you, she said, trying to get a direct hit on his lips. Miss Holloway, that will be quite enough, said the instructor as he walked into the room. All right, she said, lifting herself off Matt, who just shook his head and brushed off his pants in exasperation.